I recorded some initial thoughts on this fight when it was announced and when it was initially made. We're now in fight week, and I wanted to talk about the fight briefly again. These are two guys who, if you look at the bookmaker's price, there is a vast discrepancy in terms of the prices. Now, that would suggest, in my mind, that these guys are at different levels of their career. You know, sometimes you get it when two unbeaten prospects clash, but they can still have performed in such different ways against such a different level of opposition that such a discrepancy in the odds is merited. For example, when Anthony Joshua fought Gary Cornes, both undefeated, not a crazily dissimilar amount of fights, but Anthony Joshua deserved to be the favourite he was that night. Why? Because the level of opponent he'd beaten was so much better than Gary Cornes, and the manner in which he'd gone about business was so much better. Now, I don't see that discrepancy that I saw on that night in this fight, Rocky Fielding versus Callum Smith. Yes, Callum Smith has fought a higher level of opposition, but the difference is slight, isn't it? I mean, Nikolai Sazloka, Christopher Rabrasse, these guys are solid guys, but they're not world beaters. You know, Rocky Fielding, he's been in with a lower level of opposition. I'm not going to bother reading through his resume. I did that in my initial pre-fight video. But, you know, he probably hasn't been in with that level of opponent, but he's been in with something resembling it. And the truth is that Callum Smith is the matchroom hopeful. Callum Smith is the golden child. Callum Smith is supposed to be the next big thing. Matchroom have just spent a few more quid on his opponents than they have of Rocky Fielding's. That's my opinion anyway. Now, to me, as Callum Smith has stepped up in levels, I don't want to say he's struggled because he's won convincingly, but he's given me some causes for concern. You know, as he was going up and up the ranks, he looked like a murderous puncher. Suddenly he fights Christopher Rabrasse and Sazloka, you know, not contender level, but let's say ranked level, top 50 level. And suddenly the KOs stop. Suddenly, whilst his punches obviously have a lot of sting in them, he's not the amazing knockout artist he was when he was coming up through the ranks. I also think there's some defensive frailty with Callum Smith. For me, Callum Smith is, I don't want to say he's a super middleweight Vladimir Klitschko type fighter, because he does, you know, he's not that robotic, and he does have different variables to his game. I mean, notably, Callum Smith is a fantastic body puncher, whereas Vladimir Klitschko is not. But for example, for me, he's very much an upright, tall, long fighter who fights behind a long 1-2. You know, that's his MO. That's how he likes to box. That's how he's most comfortable. Yeah, he can punch to the body. Yeah, he can mix it up a little bit. But I'm yet to see him being a fully well-rounded fighter in terms of an inside game, which is often a struggle for tall, rangy fighters. I've yet to see him be defensively sound. And some of the pressure that Rabrasse was able to put on him, some of the punches that Rabrasse was able to get through his defences, you know, you have to question, if Rabrasse had been an elite level operator, how would Callum Smith have operated that night? How would he have coped? For me, Callum Smith, he's very, very upright. There's a limit to his head movement. Yeah, he's not the most athletic mover. I just see him as quite a sort of static, rigid fighter defensively, both in his positioning, his body positioning, and his head movement. You know, he's not, as I'm seeing it, you know, like someone like Billy Joe Saunders is giving you angles. He's bobbing and weaving. He's bending at the waist and ducking. He's got good head movement. He's got great reflexes. I'm not seeing that from Callum Smith. And if a fighter like Christopher Rabrasse is given any sort of cause for concern, for me, as you step up to the George Groves, as you step up to the James the Gales of this world, you could be in big trouble. You know, and Callum Smith, the opponents he's been in with, Sazloka, Rabrasse, they're solid enough fighters, don't get me wrong, but they're not notable punchers. You know, so whilst Callum Smith hasn't looked chinny at any stage in his career so far, as he steps up to fight a real big puncher, we could, you know, see different results. And Rocky Fielding, for me, is an excellent puncher. For me, as he stepped up the level of oppositions, the knockouts have continued. He's looked to be a harder puncher than I've seen before, and his power continues to impress me. And it's not just his power, because power is only, you know, 50% of the equation. You can be a very hard puncher, like Alex Leopai in the heavyweight division, but you can be so technically limited that against a top-class fighter, you can't land one of your power punches. Now, with Rocky Fielding, it's not just his power that's impressed me, it's his accuracy, it's his timing. In his recent fight against Brian Vera, I know the stoppage there was controversial, but the way he was boxing Brian Vera, the way he was timing him, the way he was waiting for a gap and then slipping through a big punch really, really impressed me. And the way he took about Brian Vera like that makes me think, could he find the same gaps in Smith's defence that Rebrasse found? Possibly. And if Rocky Fielding lands, will it have more effect than Rebrasse? Don't rule out Rocky Fielding by knockout in this fight. Don't rule that out at all. I mean, Callum Smith is a guy who in my mind has defensive questions to answer. Callum Smith is a guy who in my mind has not shown that he's got an excellent chin. He may do, he just hasn't shown it yet. Whereas as Rocky stood up and up and up in levels, he's punched harder and stronger. I certainly do not rule out Rocky Fielding in this fight. I understand why Callum Smith's favourite. Now I think Callum Smith's power in this fight has been overrated as well. Don't get me wrong, Callum Smith can punch very hard, but I'm yet to see this sort of stunning one-punch knockout power to the head. The way people talk about him is like he's a Sergei Kovalev-style murderous puncher. Callum Smith can hit very, very hard. For me, he's a guy with a really, really painful body punch. But when you step into the top 20 of the sport in your weight division, you tend to find, and obviously there are exceptions here, but you tend to find that the knockouts come to the head more than the body, because the athletes are so well conditioned and so defensively sound, etc. Now, I'm yet to see Callum Smith laying out people with headshots. Don't get me wrong, he can knock someone out. He's taken out lower level opponents. And Callum Smith can clearly bang. He's got a chance in any fight to win by knockout. But I don't think it's a coincidence that as he stepped up to fight over Brasses and Szlockas, the knockouts have stopped. I think that's very much linked to him stepping up in class. And I think Rocky Fielding has the potential to be on another level to those guys altogether. Rocky Fielding's been training very, very hard for this fight. He looks in good shape. He's been sparring with the likes of Martin Murray. Whilst Callum Smith, is a very, very big guy at 168. Don't forget that Rocky Fielding is also a very big, strong, tough guy at the weight. For me, Callum Smith goes into most fights being the guy with the punch, the guy with the size, the guy with the momentum. But on this occasion, Rocky's bringing equal momentum. Rocky's bringing decent size. Rocky could be bringing more power. Who knows? And whilst Rocky's chin is as untested as Callum Smith's is, for me, just looking at the power dynamic, I'm tempted to say that Rocky Fielding might have the bigger punch as they step up in class here. Now, I'm looking at this from a value perspective in terms of gambling here. But for me, as I've already mentioned, I really make this a very tight fight. I can see why Smith is favourite, and I can see why people are picking Smith. Of course I can. I stuck up a Facebook status earlier asking people who they were picking. And I think of about 10 responses, I had 7 or 8 saying Callum Smith. And most of them going for stoppage mid to late rounds. They just think that Smith will be too much for Rocky Fielding. I can see that. Smith's a big guy, he's the big name. He's going to come out, he's going to be fighting behind a jab. He's probably the ranger operator. He'll be throwing those shots to the body, trying to break down the opponent. I can see why Callum Smith is favourite. But not at the prices. For me, anyone who goes to place a bet on Callum Smith winning this fight at the prices is crazy. And even if you go and win the bet, even if Callum Smith starches Rocky Fielding, for me, you're still mental and you still made the wrong decision to place the bet at those prices because it's just terrible value. I make this fight a 50-50 fight. I genuinely see it going either way, but I can understand why Smith is the favourite due to public perceptions. But let me tell you, I'm not trying to step onto Dwyer's territory here, because I'm a massive fan of his channel, but I think there's scope to hedge the play, as Dwyer would say, in this fight. I really do. Rocky Fielding is 3-1 with several major bookmakers. If you look it out on oddschecker.com, you can get 3-1 with some of the major bookmakers in the UK. There's even some scope if you use one of the lesser known bookmakers, or if you maybe go on Betfair Exchange, you're going to get 7-2. In other words, if you put £100 on Rocky Fielding to win, you get £400 back, £300 winnings and your £100 stake returned. Now, I think there's reasonable value in that bet as it is. It's a bet that I'm inclined to take at those odds, to be honest, because I see it as a 50-50 fight. If you're nervous, I also like the idea of hedging the play of £100 on Rocky Fielding to win the fight at 3-1 or 7-2, and £100 on Callum Smith to win the fight on points at 7-4. In other words, you put £100 on Smith to win on points, you get £275 back, £175 winnings, and your £100 stake. So what I'm getting at here is you could put £100 on Rocky Fielding to win the fight. You could put £100 on Callum Smith to win on points. Now, if Callum Smith wins on points, you're £75 in profit for the entire play. If Rocky Fielding wins by points or by knockout, you are £200 up for the play. Now, gambling's a risky business. If the fight goes to a draw, you lose your money. If Callum Smith wins by knockout, you lose your money. Another way to look at it would be, if you're familiar with the UK gambling exchanges like Betfair, you could simply go on and lay, as in bet against, Callum Smith to win by knockout. Personally, I see that as a very interesting play. Gambling's a risky business, you know. Callum Smith could easily go out there and knock Rocky Fielding out. Rocky Fielding could go out there, get a cut, and it could be classed as a knockout. Rocky Fielding could get disqualified. Rocky Fielding could break his hand on Callum Smith's face, you know, and the fight has to be called off. This is a risky business. I'm not suggesting that this is a safe play. Yeah, if you want safety, go and stick your money in a bank. But what I'm getting at is, for me, from a value basis, I like this hedge. I really do. I think Smith's power is overrated. He couldn't stop Rebrasse. He couldn't stop Sizlocka. For me, Rocky Fielding's a level above those guys. And let's see how Callum Smith responds when those guys are actually able to hit back with the Rocky Fielding timing and the Rocky Fielding power. I think, if anything, that will dissuade Callum Smith. You know, you're hedging the play with Callum on points, because Callum is a good boxer, and you could see him outpointing Rocky Fielding. But you're taking Rocky for the win, because who knows if Callum can live with Rocky's power. And I think Rocky's an underrated boxer. I like the bet. I like the bet. That's my recommendation. Rocky to win the fight, hedge with Callum Smith to win the fight on points. I'm taking on the Smith KO. I think Smith is an overrated puncher based around matchroom hype. He may well prove me wrong. If he does prove me wrong, I'll be the first to come on here and say it. I like Callum Smith. I've got nothing against him whatsoever. But just as much as I like Callum Smith, I do like Rocky Fielding. And when I like two fighters, and when I see them as very, very even, and you're getting 3-1 on one of them, for me, that's when it starts to become interesting from a gambling perspective. Let me know your thoughts. Do leave them in the comments below. Am I crazy? Do you agree with me? If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. For more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. I've got a few coming. Thanks for watching.